Welcome everybody. My name is Francisco Arenas. Welcome to this third webinar on EBT. This time we're going to discuss about FCL matters. So welcome all of you today on Friday, 29th of October. Before we start, I would like to give the floor to my head of department, Bernard Bourdon, who will make a welcome speech. Bernard is the head of the Aircrew and Medical Department in the European Aviation Safety Agency in Cologne. He's been in EASA since 2006. He previously managed the investigation and reporting activities and has over 20 years of experience in aviation safety. Prior to EASA, he worked 7 years in the conduct of accident and incident investigation at the French BEA, where he was also flying a state aircraft as a pilot in the framework of his professional duties. He holds a master's degree in aeronautics from the École Nationale d'Aviation Civile in Toulouse, and he started his career back in 1995. Bernard, welcome.
Thank you, Francisco. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on EBT. So as you already know, this is the third EBT information session. So we spoke last time about the grading system. Today, we also know that successful implementation of EBT comes from a joint work of an airline and also the national competent authorities. So it's quite an important information session today. We will see the implementation from the authority perspective. And we will have a presentation from EASA on how you have to address the EBT regulation in regards to FCL matters. But we will also have the chance to get the live experience of two national competent authorities who accepted to join us for these sessions. From the DGAC France, we have a strong team with 4 persons. And I would like to thank Charles Fèvre-Chaudouin for joining us, Antoine Lelaire. We also have Nicolas Tecles and Bertrand Gron. And from the second authority side, it is AESA Spain. And here we also have a good team with Troncoso Fernandez Silvia. We have Elena Revenga, and they will both present the authorities' perspective who have live experience with EBT implementation. And last, as we have now set it up in this webinar, we will have the panel. The panelists are, as usual, the people that you saw last time, which means that we will have Ignacio Gallego for Alemany from Iberia. We will have Frédéric Monham from the National Aerospace Center, and we will have ATPG Chair Andy Mitchell. So I wish you a successful webinar, and I give the floor now to my colleagues for the technical content. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernard. John, I think it's your turn to give some rules of the house, please. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is John Franklin, and I'm Head of Safety Promotion here at EASA. And just to kind of run through a couple of quick points with you, so you're aware of how we're going to run this session. So the main thing is just to remember, if you've been before and there's a new thing, if you need to send me a message as the host, and the people, you know, if you've got any problems, technical issues, sound problems, etc., then use the chat function. If you have any questions for the panelists throughout the webinar, then just use the Q&A function. So they're the two things to remember. If you accidentally put a question in the chat, I'll drop you a message just to remind you to please put it in the Q&A, and then we'll be answering all the questions we can. You know, depending on the questions, we might not be able to answer every single one, but certainly we'll get through as many as we can through the discussion. We will be posting the PPTs on the community site EBT page, and I'll drop that EBT page, the web address, into the chat a bit later on, and then throughout the event, so you can make sure to bookmark that. We've got the information from the other webinars already in there, the video recordings, etc., and the PPTs. And again, we'll post the recordings there afterwards. So that's all the basics. Say if you have any questions, just let me know, and hopefully we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it'll be good, and I'll hand back now to Francisco and the team, and away we go.
Thank you, John. Give me 1 second because I need to share my presentation with all of you guys. So let's see if I do this correctly. John, just for a check on my presentation, if it runs fine. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome everybody to this third webinar on the FCL matters this time. My name is Francisco Arenas Alvareño. I am the project manager of Rulemaking Task 0599 and SPT 012 on EBT, evidence-based training. With me, Ascanio Rousseau, senior aircrew expert and OSD experts as well. He's been since the beginning in this project as well, and among others, he's operational suitability data expert with very interesting things to, very interesting projects to do, and also he's an examiner, an instructor, and a pilot, among others, on the 747. So without more delay, I go to start the presentation. So here there's an agenda for today. Bernard already provides some insight of today's EBT webinar. We will kick in with a first session, session 1, presented by Ascanio and myself. We will try to address some of important elements. So among others, revalidation and renewal from a regulatory perspective, FCL instructor certificate in the context of EBT as well from a regulatory perspective. And then I hope we have basically 15 minutes time, 10 to 15 minutes time to address some of the questions directly to the regulator. I remind you that on session 3, you will have an opportunity to participate in the panel, and Frederick and Andy will take some of your questions and put it into the panel. The session, then we will have a break around 14:20 probably. And we will kick in with a session 2 for DGAC France and EASA Spain. I'd remind you that EASA Spain and DGAC France are the two first authorities that been revalidated pilot license under the EBT program. So again, I congratulate Spain and DGAC France for this achievement. We will kick in with a presentation from DGAC France with Charles, Antoine, Nicolas, and Bertrand. Charles and Antoine will be the main presenters. Silvia Troncosa and Elena will kick in later on, presenting the implementation of the Spanish authority. We will have a break again, and then a session 3 with a panel discussion led by Frederick and Andy. Frederick will be at the end of session 2 will give you a little bit of a briefing of what is intended to be in session 3. So without more delay, I would like to highlight that our presentation, the EASA presentation, will kick in around instructors, examiners, revalidation and renewal, and Appendix 10. So first, it will be done before we kick in into the presentation, and the first one to present it will be Ascanio. I would like to remind you a couple of things about the safety promotion task and the, let's say, the safety promotion that we are exercising here in EASA. The first thing is that currently the Part FCL is not fully accessible under the ECSX rules. So you guys will need to go into the regulation 2020-2193 or the ET decision as well and search in Google for those regulations, because today is not incorporated into the EC access rules. However, we are planning to do this within the next two to 3 weeks. We are planning to publish a new EC access rules in which the FCL part will be included. Just a reminder, the OPS part of EBT is already included in the EC access rules since July this year. Finally, here I have the chair of the ATPG, Andy Mitchell. Probably Christian Northern is here as well. Christian Northern is the focal point in the ATPG who, with a team of experts, we are developing the EBT manual. We expect to publish on the first quarter 2022. So that means it's a quarter delay from the European Plan for Aviation Safety 2021-2024. We may publish before the end of the year, but I am not sure, and therefore I would like you to expect that the publication of the EBT manual with a 1 quarter delay will be on the first quarter 2022. Let's see if we can publish before the end of the year. Then I would like to remind you that the next EBT webinar is the number 4. It will be on malfunction clustering. It will be Boeing and Airbus participating in this webinar. And on behalf of ATPG will be Christian Northern, is the expert that developed at the time he was in Airbus, and is the expert that developed at the time the malfunction clustering, the regulation in the current EBT regulation. And this is planned for 7th of December 2021. So please save on your calendar to make sure that you can participate. The next EBT webinar is going to be in February 2022, and there's going to be another one on March 2022 again. So without more delay, I would like to give the floor to Ascanio, and we're going to, for a second, we're going to change cameras, and then okay, here, okay, you're going to be there.
Yeah, so just
okay.
Thank you.
So then
you just need to click, yeah, just to keep you go there.
Okay.
So first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, also from my side. As we anticipated during the last webinar, the EBT regulation is composed by several blocks. One of this block, which is important in the EBT, is the instructor. Now, the scope of the today presentation is not to go through the instructor course in the EBT, or not only, but to see what are the links and what is triggering or allowing EBT instructor to be qualified as a EBT instructor through the part FCL regulation. So today we have 2 major changes in the regulation, the Subpart J, which is the 905 TRI and 905 SFI, which have been amended a bit, and now includes the privilege for TRIs and SFIs to conduct a EBT practical assessment in an EBT operator course approved by the authority. The training of the trainers, the training of the instructor is paramount, and it is important that operators will do properly. This will return on investments. Of course, the EBT instructor course and the qualification of the instructor is based on 2 main aspects. One is the theoretical part and the practical part, and before the conducting assessment of the training in an EBT program, the EBT instructor should complete and pass the EBT Assessment of Competence. As we said during last webinar, the practical EBT training include the evaluation of performance using a competence base, and this means that the instructor have to be exposed to different levels of pilot performance, and as well as a different scenario. At the end of the EBT course, the instructor should be able to be familiar with the EBT, all EBT modules, the EBT structure of the operator, and on top of that, should be very familiar with the competencies and the grading system. Now, in the MC, we have established a minimum of 14 hours for the EBT instructor training course. However, the recommendation is to have a course lasting between 21 and 24 hours. One of the prerequisites to become an EBT instructor is to be already an instructor. Now, here is a matter of interpretation, but our understanding is that you can combine an FCL course with an EBT instructor course, provided that during the course, the ATO is able to fulfill the requirements set in both regulations. So a new operator can ask an ATO to run an EBT instructor course in parallel with an initial TRI, SFI, or CRI course. What is important is that the course approved by the authority covers all elements of the Part FCL as well as the RFC requirements. Another important aspect is that once you complete the initial standardization course, initial EBT course, then you plan to have the recurrent standardization program, which includes at least 6 evaluation or scenario-based training phases of an EBT module. And this has to be every 36 months, which is a quite low requirement, but is in line with the Part FCL. What is additional, really important, is that for the EBT, to keep the currency on the EBT, for the instructor to keep the currency to exercise the EBT privileges, he received the annual recurrent standardization, which is composed by the refresh EBT training and the concordance training. Every 3 years, as per approved regulation, the instructor has to complete the assessment of competence. One of the minor difference is that on the Part FCL, we could have the revalidation of TRI certificate through experience or with assessment of competence. For the EBT, you have to complete the assessment of competence every 3 years. As we said last time, the operator is required to run every 3 years an Appendix 9 check to evaluate if the EBT course is good enough, let's say, to pass the Appendix 9 as in per legacy training. However, this comparison or this Appendix 9 exercise should also give the feedback on the instructor's quality. It is really important that EBT manager will verify through this Appendix 9 if the level of instructor is too easy, too demanding, or whatever, but it's important to rerun or rewrite the standardization course of instructors. What about examiners? It is clear now that examiners, in terms of numbers, are less important in the EBT program, but only in terms of number. Why? Because today the examiner are running all the revalidation and renewal for all pilots, and this is clearly required to have a high number of examiners. Today, as Francisco will explain later on, the revalidation is conducted through the Appendix 10. This means that we will not require examiner to run the LPZ as per today. However, examiners are still required to conduct the initial and the revalidation or renewal assessment of competence for TRIs. Top of that, there is also the requirement for examiners to complete some license proficiency check renewal, which Francisco will explain later on under certain conditions, and Francisco will explain what are those conditions. However, we tried also, or the regulation tried also to address the requirements for the examiner to keep the currency of the examiner certificate. This means that as per today, an examiner has to run at least 2 checks per year, which are 6 checks per 3 years period to maintain the recency. To allow this, the regulation includes now that on top of the skill test, proficiency check, assessment of competence, also the EBT evaluation phases during the EBT module are counted in the six events that examiner need to keep currency on her certificate. Discussion could be raised on when one of these exams has to be supervised by a senior examiner to conduct the assessment of competence for the examiner. This will be led to the examiner as well as to the authority to decide, but mainly in our understanding, this should be done during the skill test or proficiency check outside EBT. However, this is possible also during an EBT module. And back to you, Francisco.
Thank you very much, Ascanio. So now we're going to discuss about the revalidation and renewal of licenses from in the EBT program. Sorry that I go straight into the regulation, but we are the regulator. You guys will have time during session 2 and session 3 to discuss the implementation. So I'm going to go straight into the regulation and remind you that the new amending regulation 2021-2193 that we published in December 2020 includes the following elements that is important to highlight. That we amended FCL 625 and FCL 740 to include in the revalidation the EBT practical assessment. I provided the definition, but the EBT practical assessment in terms of FCL means an Appendix 10, which is the vehicle, the administrative vehicle to revalidate both the instrument rating and the type rating. Now I'm going to explain a little bit the concept of revalidation in EBT. But for that, I need to go back to the traditional concept of revalidation. The traditional concept of revalidation is kind of a photo. There's one applicant, there's one technical assessment with one examiner and one administrative procedure in a single event. So all those 4 elements are done in a single event. It's like a photo. When we discuss about EBT, we try to move away from that photo and kind of provide a revalidation based on a continuous assessment in which we focus on training instead of checking. So the EBT concept of revalidation, which is explained in the explanatory note of the ED decision 2021-002R, you can find this in the internet. In the explanatory note, we explain how now the concept is moved from one applicant. Obviously, there's one applicant or 2 applicants at the same time, but one applicant that receiving the Appendix 10. But this is based on a continuous assessment with several technical assessments. We did that and we explained that because this is important that we move from a checking environment to a training environment in which the competencies are developed. And to develop competencies is not just one single event, but it has to be multiple events, focusing on the instruction, on the instructor. So that put a challenge to the whole setup of the revalidations of license, because we are moving from a single assessment to several technical assessments. Then another idea that I would like to explain is that in the traditional checking, the administrative action and the technical assessment is done in a single event. But now in EBT, due to the fact that there's a continuous assessment, we had to separate it, the administrative procedure, which is done, let's say, in the office, from the several technical assessments which are done in the FSTT. You don't see this today because in the simulator or after the simulator, the examiner will fill out the Appendix 9. But now with EBT, due to this concept, the administrative procedure is clearly separated and is done in the office. This is done by the EBT manager or by the examiner designated by the operator. And because of this, then there was an extra burden, which is this delegation of signature, because we wanted to facilitate that if the EBT manager or the deputy was not placed in the same place as the FSTD location, then there was still the possibility to revalidate the license. So we allow the delegation of signatures. We included in the AMC the fact that this has to be an instructor, because although the instructor doesn't have any responsibility on signing, the responsibility belongs to the EBT manager. We are trying to mitigate any possible mistakes or any possible errors, and that's why the AMC clearly states that it should be an instructor, the one that is delegating. Although, again, he's not receiving any responsibility, and the responsibility belongs to the EBT manager and ultimately to the operator. So we are moving from a photo to a movie, and that's a concept that I want you to take home. Next element is about the renewal this time. The renewal is in the amending regulation 2021-2193, is located in the FCL 625 and FCL 740. And basically, we allow that the EBT operator could perform the refreshers training and the assessment to complete then later on an Appendix 10. So the regulation is provided here, but basically we give new privilege to the EBT operator to make the assessment and perform the refresher training. This was something that is only allowed under the EBT, and no other operator is allowed to do a renewal of licenses. Obviously, the ATO remains in control, the ATO remains with this privilege. However, in order to do an Appendix 10, remember that the ATO needs to have a contract or is under OROGEN 205 contracted activity in order to be able to perform the Appendix 10. So the renewal now is also, because of the EBT operator, is also reflected in the EROPS regulation, in Regulation 965. And you can see in the ED decision 2021-002R that there's an AMC 1 or FC 231 Alpha 5 that discuss this possibility. That AMC is related to all contingency of the EBT program. So although it includes the renewal of licenses, it includes other elements, other contingency procedures like missing one module or, you know, sick pilot and all those kind of things that can happen in the EBT program. Focusing on this AMC and specifically in the renewal, we advise, and this is an AMC, so the operator, the EBT operator, should only perform renewals when the pilot has expired by less than 1 year. We don't recommend, and it's an AMC, we don't recommend that you follow the EBT program and the EBT procedures to revalidate a pilot longer than 1 year. So if the pilot is 1 year and 1 day expiry, then they should do it through the traditional program in the ATO and end up in an Appendix 9 renewal process. While if it's less than 1 year, then the pilot could do it under the EBT program. I do remind you that there's an AMC in OROFC 231 about the enrolled and de-enroll of the pilot. So when the pilot is, let's say, 2 years expiry, you do through the ATO, Appendix 9, and then you can join back again the EBT program and then the enrollment that is provided in an AMC to OROFC 231 alpha as well. The procedure will be to follow a module, meaning 2 simulator sessions, at least 2 simulator sessions. In fact, for the renewal, it requires 3 simulator sessions in which you do first an eval and maneuvers training. Then you do the following day, whenever it happens, a training session, an SBT. And then it follows with an additional session in which the training Bs and Cs of the other module that is missing because it's 1 year. So this pilot has probably missed 2 modules. They do the topics B and C. They don't need to do again the maneuvers training because they did it the day before or 2 days before. They don't do the topics alpha because they already did it either in the eval or in the SBT. And they just need to concentrate in the Bs and Cs that were missing from the other module. And that gives also sometimes, normally in a 4-hour sim, that gives also time to train other topics. If it is competent, the pilot is competent and the grading is above 2 or above, then the pilot can resume line operation. One important thing to say is that all these module plus, because it's 3 sessions, so let's say a module plus, is done and conducted by examiners. So it cannot be conducted by regular instructor. Therefore, and as you see, the examiner, not only because of the revalidation, but also in renewals and in other processes, examiners are still needed in the EBT program. Finally, I would like to discuss very briefly about the Appendix 10. The form of the Appendix 10 can be found in an AMC in the ED decision 2021-002R. There's an AMC 1 to Appendix 10 in which you can see the form. I would like to stop in some elements. So there are the typical applicant data in which you need to put your name, the typical details of the applicant. And then you have 3 columns or 3 lines in which you have EBT Module 1, EBT Module 2, and EBT Module X. Why we put EBT Module X? Because there are programs that requires more than 2 modules. That's available, but also for certain pilots, maybe that for different reasons, they were doing more than 2 modules and they did, let's say, 3 modules. This X means whatever modules you do, if you do 4, if you do 3, or then those modules will be included in the Appendix 10. Another idea that I would like to say is that inside the box of the EBT module, you will see that there's session 1, session 2, and then X. The same happens, you know, you have a session 1, you have a session 2, but you could have other session, maybe because you have a broken sim and then you stop in the middle of one session and then you exercise another session, so session 3, or for other reasons, that pilot or that program has more than 2 sessions. On completion of the first EBT module, the EBT manager at the time, so if I do it in January, the EBT manager at the time confirms that the EBT module was completed. Later on the year, let's assume that I do another module in August, then I will exercise the session 1, 2, or 3, whatever appropriate, and then maybe on the meantime, the EBT manager has been changed. That EBT manager will be the new EBT manager in August or September, will be the guy that signs for the EBT module 2. Let's assume that I don't do a module 3, but then it comes my administrative action and my company decides to do that in October because my license expires at the end of the year. In that case, when the administrative action is to be performed, then again, the EBT manager will confirm, which may be the same EBT managers throughout the 3 signatures, or maybe 2 or 3, because there's been changes in the operator. So then that EBT manager that is exercising the administrative action will complete and confirm that the operator program is done, because maybe after my module 2, I was doing a theoretical training or something necessary, and then confirms that the completion of the EBT program was done. And then the examiner will sign, in this case, let's assume that is the EBT manager. And if there's any delegation back to the instructor, it will be done as well. Finally, there's if you turn the page of the AMC that I told you, you will see some confirmations that the EBT manager needs to say regarding that he holds the type certificate as an examiner at that time of the revalidation, that the instructor participating in the revalidation, no, in module 1, module 2, and so on, they were standardized, and that the operator has performed 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, has performed the verification of the grading system to ensure that those instructors were concordant. And then finally, that the data is being integrated, that the data has integrity, meaning that you didn't have any hackers that broke your system, that the data is reliable, and so on. With this, I finish my presentation, and we can accept now questions. So let me unshare my screen, and then we will be ready to take some questions. It will be until 20 past, so we will have roughly 12 minutes, 30 minutes to do that. So give me 1 second, and we will discuss some questions. Okay, we're gonna clarify a question that I pass the floor to Ascanio about the partial pass. Please, guys, if you guys, the people in the audience, if you have questions, please let us know. Type in the Q&A your questions, and then we will discuss. Otherwise, we will break for. We will stop for a break. But I give the floor to Ascanio. I don't know, Ascanio, in the camera.
Just to clarify one concept that Francisco explained before is about the extra session, the so-called section X. So today with the Appendix 9, we have 3 options. The option 1 is you pass, the option 2 you fail, the option 3 is partial pass. With the partial pass, you stop to what happened. When you have partial pass, you have to stop to exercise your privileges. So it means that at the time of the test, you cannot conduct, you cannot fly anymore with that type rating, or you can exercise the privileges of that type rating. As Francisco clearly explained before, on the EBT program, you don't have this single event. It is a full year event during which we have the LPC elements always embedded in the OPC elements. This means that if the operator, the EBT operator, during one of the sessions grade the standard of the pilot below the minimum requirement, then in this moment in time, the pilot cannot exercise the privilege in the operator. And then for sure, you will see that in the Appendix 9, you will have an extra session that has been run by the operator to provide the remedial training and to let him to fly again. So the concept is not, as Francisco explained before, not based in a single event, but based on a year event, but is almost the same. So once the pilot performance is below the standard, pilot cannot continue to fly or cannot continue to exercise the privileges. And it's almost the same concept of partial pass. And this is the reason why we have this X table and extra table in the Appendix 9.
Correct. Just for you guys, maybe because he's using the regulatory for the common people means when you grade 1 in the 1 to 5. So when the pilot is graded 1, is not competent, and that will kick in what Ascanio has explained. Okay, we have another question. I just picking up some questions. So we have a question from Mr. Verbreken. I think it's Dutch. Sorry for my pronunciation. So he has he put the following question: does an instructor involved in a mixed EBT program have to go through a full EBT instructor course? So for the EBT program, mixed implementation, the only requirement is to have training. But that training, let's say, is not regulated. So it's up to the operator to decide which training is appropriate for the EBT program. So training is required. However, this training is not regulated. Point number 2 that I would like to highlight it is that obviously as an operator, you invest some time, some effort to train that instructor. If you follow, when you are starting the EBT mix implementation, if you follow the requirements, the AMC 1 or OFC 146 for baseline, and if you follow those AMCs and those learning points, then as you do that training for the EBT mix, then it will be valid for the EBT baseline. And here I see, because I've been discussing with many airlines, there are airlines like Iberia, which is going to be later on joining us in the section 3, that they decided that as I need to train my instructors in EBT mix, then let's do already the necessary course for EBT baseline. So in 3 years' time or in 2 years' time, I don't need to retrain my instructors again. And that was a choice by the operator, by Ignacio Gallego, that he will explain, and you can ask further this question. There are other airlines that has followed a different approach, and they started with an initial small training to implement EBT mix, and through the implementation of EBT during those 3 years, they had slowly qualified their whole fleet of instructors for in accordance to the AMC 1 or OFC 146, so the instructor requirements for EBT baseline. And that's a choice of the operator. I cannot tell you which one is best, but training is required for EBT mix. However, this is not regulated. And then in the EBT baseline, you need training, and that training of the instructor is regulated. So please follow the AMC1 order of C146. We have another questions. Well, we have many questions, but I'm going to pick up another one. Okay, so Martin Rosener, he just put the question. So sorry, because the last questions come earlier on my list. So if you guys have other questions, then maybe you need to repeat the question again. So I see it up there in my list. We only have 4 minutes, so maybe this is the last one, but let's see. When switching from mixed to full EBT, is it sufficient to perform the first verification of the difficulty / Appendix 9 cross-check during the first 3 full EBT years? So we are talking about what we explained before about the verification of the grading system. There's a requirement in the EBT baseline that once every 3 years you need to do a verification. However, when you are coming from the EBT mix, you are doing that verification, let's say, every year on your LPC, okay? So you can use normally what Ignacio can explain further, or I don't know if Fabian from Air France will be here, but normally you can use the verification you did in the mix implementation, and let's say, and for the first 1 or 2 years, let's say, take the verification the many verifications you did through the EBT mix implementation and use that to fulfill the AMC1 Oro FC 231 Delta 2, which is the one that discusses about the verification of the grading system. You are the expert in FCL, Ascanio. I don't know if you want to complement my answer or...
No, I would like to complement this question, which is related with your, and is about the follow-up for an instructor, which is classes instructor and EBT instructor. I think that this is a very nice and interesting question. First of all, we are not talking about quality of instructor. We are not judging instructor. We are simply try to highlight the differences. Today, if you are qualified as instructor, let's say TRI, yeah? You pass your assessment of competence, then you don't exercise your privileges for the next, let's say, 30 months. You are still fully qualified, and provided you receive your own standardization in the ATO where you provide the training, you can simply deliver the training in accordance with the ATO standards, and that's it. For an EBT instructor that has to be qualified in accordance with Part FCL, so meaning he has to be also a classic instructor, and on top of that, he can obtain the EBT qualification. Then an instructor, to exercise the privileges of EBT instructor, has to keep the so-called currency. So means that he has to do the standardization course every year in the EBT operator with all the possible consequences, plus he has to be verified in the grading system. So this is, we believe, is the main difference, plus the assessment of competence every 3 years, which is mandated to the EBT instructor.
Thank you very much, Ascanio. I don't know, we have 1 more minute, but I don't know, we have another 8 questions to make that people answered. I don't know, John,
yes.
Maybe we...
Just the last one. Can the EBT manager also to be the EBT instructor, or is the requirement multiple person to be involved? No, he can easily be. Of course, in the moment that he is also the EBT instructor, let's say, and this performance or this training is delivered at the end of the year of the applicant, is in that moment in time is the perfect person in the perfect place, because he can deliver the training, but he can even also exercise the privilege as an examiner and as a EBT manager to fill all the papers and revalidate on the spot the license.
Correct. So, the EBT manager is still an examiner, is still an instructor, and he can exercise all the privilege, all the, let's say, the 3 privileges as an EBT manager, as an EBT instructor, as an EBT examiner.
There are
Okay.
no limits,
Correct.
like the examiner for the initial training. There are no
Yeah.
limits in this, in the EBT.
Perfect, perfect. So let's break for 10 minutes, guys. So we will kick in a few moments, in 10 minutes time, with session 2. We will start with DGAC France and Iberia, and AESA Spain at 1430 local time here, Berlin, Brussels, Madrid, and Paris. So I see you guys all in 10 minutes. Thank you. Dear all, welcome back to the second session of this EBT webinar. I would like to introduce our next guests. The next presentation is on behalf of DGAC France, which is one of the authorities, one of the first authorities to implement EBT, full EBT, and perform the revalidations of licenses for Air France under the EBT program. The presentation is going to be provided by Antoine Lelaire. He's a surveillance inspector in the licensing department of DGAC France. And he's the administrator of the SIGEBEL, which is the French license database for the revalidations of licenses. With Antoine, the presentation is also be conducted with Charles Febvre Chaudenu. He is also a surveillance inspector in the examiners department, in the exams department, and he is also the administration of the French license database SIGEBEL. So without further delay, welcome Charles and Antoine. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Thank you very much. We hear you fine. Can you share your screen with us?
Here we go.
Thank you very much. So the floor is yours, Charles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you everybody for having us today. So just like Francisco said, the first part of this WebEx was more about the regulation part of EBT license revalidation. But my coworker and I are going to talk about how we did the practical part of the EBT license revalidation. So let me begin by explaining very quickly how DGAC handles the license revalidation. So as of today, we offer operators 3 different ways to revalidate a pilot's license. Of course, a pilot enrolled in an EBT program. So the first option is the most basic one. So it's sending an appendix 10 to our office, to our licensing office. Antoine will talk about it in just a minute. But we also offer 2 other ways to do that in a more efficient way. We have made an update to what we call SIGEBEL Ext, or SIGEBEL External Portal, which is a website on which examiners can connect with a password and ID, and they can fill in an Appendix 10 on the browser, on the internet browser, and it sends the information to our database, and thus the license is revalidated. But the big novelty for DGAC is the last way to revalidate a license, which is through what we call a web service, and I will talk about it after that. So for now, I will let Antoine explain the first way to revalidate a pilot license, that is to say, the administrative process with a revalidation form. Antoine, let's go.
Thank you, Charles, for your introduction. So this solution permits pilots to either revalidate or renew their type rating and instrument rating qualification. So it's like the candidates send to the licensing office filled completed Appendix 10, and the license inspectors can implement this renewal or revalidation into our system SIGEBEL. And the pilots who are renewing type rating and instrument rating qualification have to go through the licensing office. So the 2 other solutions that Charles presented earlier just give the ability to revalidate, not to renew. So for candidates in a renewing situation, this is the process they have to go through with. So yeah, basically that's it. So it's either a transmission of the documents by email or physically speaking in a licensing office. And so the licensing office can revalidate or renew the qualifications and endorse the license with the new expiry date of the qualification type rating and instrument rating. So I will just give the speaking back to Charles, who is going to explain you the two other solutions that we developed for the EBT.
Yeah, thank you, Antoine. So to go on, so I talked about what we call CGBLX, which is, as I said before, a website on which examiners can connect and fill in Appendix 10. So here is a presentation of what you would see if you were an examiner and you connected on this site. So we had two new buttons. One to manage the signature, your signature delegates, because so these two, by the way, these two buttons are only available if in CGBL, in the database, you have an EBT manager certificate. So in our database, we fill in, us as DGAC, we fill in your file to give you an EBT manager certificate. And this gives you access to these two new buttons. So one is to manage the delegates of your signature. So as Francisco said before, to instructor only. And the second button is simply to fill in an Appendix 10, which we'll see, I think, right now. So here's an Appendix 10. So more or less, it's what you'll see as well on the screen of your browser if you were an EBT manager. And it's basically the main component that you can see on the EMC Appendix 10. So the first part is about the candidate. And then we have also training information. It's rather more of a compact way. It's more of a compact Appendix 10 because we don't specificate every little detail of every modules and every instruction sequence, but basically it's the way for the EBT manager to certificate that the EBT training for one candidate has been completed in its entirety, and then if the EBT manager that the training has been completed entirely, well then you can validate all of this data, and the revalidation goes through its process in CGBL. So the license of the applicant is revalidated, and the EBT manager receive the line that has to be endorsed on the applicant's license. So that's the process. We almost have the same process. It's kind of the same process with Appendix 9 as well on the same website. It's pretty much the same process, but the big novelty, yes, I was about to forget this. So as I said before, we have a button to manage the instructor with a license, with a signature delegation. So once again, the EBT manager connects on the website, and he can manage a list of instructor who have his delegation of signature. And for example, if he adds one instructor on the list, and during he fills the Appendix 10 that we saw just before, the green screen, and he can, at the end, he can either choose to endorse the license himself, or he can choose to delegate the signature. And if he chooses to delegate the signature, he has to choose the instructor in this list who will have to do the endorsement on the list, sorry, on the license. And once he validates the Appendix 10, the line that has to be endorsed on the applicant's license is not sent to the EBT manager, but it's sent to the instructor that was chosen by the EBT manager. So that's just a way to facilitate seeing things around. But the last one, and the one that I think Antoine and I are the most proud of, because we've worked hard on this, and it was complicated, but we're very proud of it. It's the what we call web service. So what we've created is a data link between, in this case, Air France and DGAC, so CGBL. So we have a data link between those two IT systems. And what we do basically is that the applicant goes through the training. The training is on their is on Air France database, all the information. The information is compiled, and it's and the EBT manager has access to all this information. So, for example, every modules, everything the instructor said, like, okay, good session, bad session, etc. So at the end of the training, the EBT manager review this data. He either validates or he doesn't validate, but if he validates, it's just a click. He validates the training data, and once the click is done, the data is sent through this through this data link. With the information, the data is sent to DGAC IT system, and so the list of the data is it's the letter that we can see on the bottom left of the screen. So once again, it's basically, if you look at it, it's basically what we have in the Appendix 10. It's the information about the applicants, of course, the information about the EBT manager, the start of the program, end of program, everything that is needed to fill the Appendix 10 that we saw earlier. So that's step one of the web service for the license revalidation. Step number two is what we call the testing phase. So obviously, Air France has sent us now some data, but we need to run some checks on those data. And the total number of tests that we do is 11. And I'm not gonna detail everything because I don't have enough time, I think. But if you have any question about it later, I can answer that. But we do test on integrity of the data. We check the date as well, the date of validity. And we also check signature delegation and stuff like that. So if, in the case of one failed test, on one of the 11 tests, if only one is failed, we send back through the same data link, we send back an error code. So we have one error code for every test that we run. Sorry. So basically we inform the operator of what went wrong and what they need to change, what they need to check in the data they have sent. But in the case of every test is passed, well then the informatical procedure begins, and so the license of the applicant is revalidated, the instrument rating as well, if possible, and from the data we've collected that they send in step one, we create an Appendix 10 that we keep a record of, so we can access it. DGAC can access the Appendix 10 all the time, just from the data that the operator has sent. And obviously, we update the applicant's file on CGBL. And the last step, of course, is to send what we call the addendum to the pilot certificate, because instead of sending back the line to endorse the applicant license, we send an entire document, which I will show you in a second, because Air France has told us that it was complicated for them to have in a single room at a single moment to have the applicant, and the EBT manager. So it was complicated for them to reunite those two, because maybe the applicant is flying somewhere else, the EBT manager as well. So it was complicated for them to bring those two people together. So it was complicated for them to do the old way of license endorsement, that is to say, to sign manually the license of the applicant. So to go around that, we send the addendum, which is this document. I don't know if you can see it clearly. I hope you can. But basically, when you look at it, once again, those two lines, qualification, I mean to say rating, valid until examiner, stuff like that, it's basically what you would have on a license. but it's just on a separate paper. And yeah, that's pretty much the end of the process of license revalidation through the web service that we put in place with Air France, because Air France has told us that they needed this kind of system. But we are looking forward. I mean, I think it's going to be at the beginning of next year. We are going to start the same process with Transavia, which is another operator. But this process is open to every operator who has an approved EBT program, of course. And it's very, very quick. It's very, very simple for the operator. And but it's very, very secure as well, because the tests that we run, we've carefully designed them to make sure that no error can be passed. So that's the end of my presentation. I think Francisco, you might take the speaking again, maybe.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you from Cologne. Thank you very much. So now we're going to continue with another presentation from AESA Spain. The two participants that will present today are Silvia Troncoso and Elena Revenga. I will start first with Silvia. Silvia Troncoso is an aeronautical engineer by the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid. He was involved in Airbus for 6 years. He's also a teacher in the associate teacher in the university in the Politécnica of Madrid, and she's been in AESA Spain for more than 13 years. She's been in different positions, from a SAF inspector, flight simulator inspector, operational inspector, but today she's the head of the Air Operations Department. So welcome back, Silvia. And I'm going to introduce as well Elena Revenga Salas. She's the head of the Professional Licensing Department in AESA Spain, the competent authority from Spain, the State Aviation Safety and Security Agency from Spain. She's responsible of this unit since 3 years ago, she's also responsible for the approvals and the oversight of the ATOs, the Aircrew Training Organization, where she's been more than 10 years. Before being a civil servant, she worked for Airbus for 15 years, and she's also a technical aeronautical engineer. Welcome back, both of you. I don't know who would like to start. Can you share? Okay, Elena, thanks. Can you share your presentation with us to make sure that everything is fine? We cannot hear you. Should I unsilent you? Okay. John, can you unsilent Elena, please?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Here I am.
Okay.
Here I am. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Can you share with us your presentation?
Okay. Can you see it now?
1 second. Not yet. Can you try again? Because it's not doing anything.
Okay. Try again.
Now is something happening.
Perfect.
The magic is starting. Okay, so now perfect. Now you have your presentation ready. So welcome, both of you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My special thanks to Francisco for the invitation to participate in this webinar. And it's a pleasure to be here and to share our so far short experience with the EBT implementations. Here you are, an overview of what Silvia and I are going to talk about. We are going to talk about the steps followed by AESA to implement the EASA EBT regulations. We're going to talk about the start of this regulation, that is the EBT practical assessment, the Appendix 10. The new requirements for the anti-revalidation revalidation, but focused on how to verify the compliance with these requirements. The same with refresher training at an AESA holder and the administrative procedure in AESA. And then Silvia will talk about the EBT program approval process and the oversight activities. Well, I would like to highlight when, how, and especially why the licensing unit of AESA participates in the approval of the EBT program of an operator when apparently and according to regulation, it's all about the operator. It's all about the part oro and EUC. During the mixed EBT phase, the licensing department of AESA was involved in the inspection of the LPCs of 2 applicants. As you all know, the minimum required time for an LPC for 1 applicant is 2 hours in a multi-pilot aircraft, of course. But in the context of mixed EBT, it would be acceptable to reduce this time to 3 hours for 2 applicants, never less than 3 hours. But the operator, well, in this case, needs to demonstrate to the competent authority that all items required for the validation of the 2 applicants' license can be completed. And in this case, this session was inspected by the FCL unit. Then, during the Iberia EBT approval process, OPS and FCL units held several internal meetings to organize the tax. In the case of licensing unit, we had to study the FCL relevant parts of the operational manuals, that is licensing procedures to be approved according to Regulation 1178. That is the renewal procedure and the delegation of signature procedures. As licensing authority, we had 2 meetings with the operator to clarify the final Appendix 10 format, to confirm if there was some additional information to be included on it, or changes in the order of the element of the form in order to facilitate the automated data transfer to Appendix 10, very important, the automation of this process. And then we agree on the signature delegation procedures from the EBT manager to Instructor. And then once Iberia was approved as baseline EBT operator, the licensing personnel was instructed in the new concept and the new internal procedure for revalidation and renewal under Appendix 10. When implementing the new regulation in the field of FCL and before adapting the internal procedures to the new requirement, it's important, really important to make understand that when an examiner is conducting a proficiency check and filling out an Appendix 9, he's confirming that this day and during this simulator session, the minimum mandatory maneuvers reflected on the Appendix 9 have been completed within the specified tolerances. However, when signing an Appendix 10, the examiner is confirming that the applicant has completed during the period of validity of the type rating the operator's EBT program applicable to that period. So I remark again, as Francisco has done before, it's important to be understood for the FCL personnel that the EBT practical assessment is conducting in accordance with the operator's EBT program, not in accordance to FCL specification, and not during a single simulator session. So we have benefits, we have advantages, no? According to the new FCL regulation for the revalidation of TR and the associated RR, no? Because they receive full credits for the proficiency check when they complete EBT practical assessment in accordance with Appendix 10, no? At an operator that has implemented EBT program, no? For the relevant type rating. Then before validating or processing, no? The revalidation, the licensing authority has to verify, is obliged to verify the compliance with the part FCL requirements. So in this case, we have to verify has the operator established an EBT program, no? Relevant for the applicable type rating of the IR in accordance with point OROFC 231. Has the operator an experience of at least 3 years in conducting a mixed EBT program? Has the organization appointed an EBT manager for each type rating within the EBT program? we have to take into account that the EBT manager is the person who ensures that the applicant complies with all qualification, training, and experience requirements of Proficiency. We have to be sure before processing a revalidation with an Appendix 10 that the applicant is enrolled in the operator's EBT program, that the applicant has completed the operator's EBT program within the period of validity. So how can we make this verification? How can the licensing authority verify the compliance with the requirements? Well, with two tools. Our internal database, we have the information regarding the applicant, the pilot, and regarding the EBT manager, the examiner. And we have the Appendix 10. And in the Appendix 10, we have the information we need. We have the certain of that the applicant has completed the operator's EBT program. Here we have this confirmation. We have the certain that the AESA is approved under the EBT program for revalidation and renewal. We have the evidences that the applicant has passed every module of the EBT program. So we can be sure that the applicant has passed, and is in flight. Is the same regarding the renewal, with the new EASA EBT regulation and AESA holder approved for renewal of type ratings under Part Oro may provide a refresher training if the applicant is enrolled in the EBT program and if the rating has lapsed by no more than 1 year. This is so because the EBT practical assessment may be combined with the refresher training determined by the AESA holder. So when processing a renewal, we need the same documental verification that when processing a revalidation, because we have the information again in the Appendix 10. The Appendix 10 is including the training, the EBT program training and the refresher training, because they are both combined. So we have the same documentation to verify. Then, as already Francisco said, if the rating has lapsed by more than 1 year, it's recommended that the applicant consider to follow the training at an ATO with the corresponding and according with the corresponding AESA. So in this case, all of us know how to process a traditional renewal. And finally, all the effort has been made in the operator during maybe a year, and then what the applicant has to do. Then the applicant has one completes the Appendix 10, it has to send the Appendix 10 together with the application form, the AESA declaration, and the revalidation certificate if the examiner or delegated instructor, in the case of AESA, revalidation certificate, has signed it, handwriting signed, and sent to AESA through the electronic office. Once AESA receives this documentation, verify the content and update the database, the pilot can download from the AESA website a new updated revalidation certificate with the new validity date. If the examiner, the EBT manager, deputy manager, delegated instructor, has not signed the revalidation certificate, the pilot must apply for a new license through the electronic office. And then we, as licensing authority, use the new license. The AESA license is electronically used, actually, as a PDF file, electronically and printed and signed. to be printed and signed by the license holder. The license is available for the pilot as a PDF document on a computer, table, or smartphone, but eventually, and while the current regulation requires the signature of the pilot, she or he has to print it, and therefore it's still a paper-based license, not an electronic license one. And now I'm going to give the floor to my colleague, Silvia Troncoso.
Thank you, Elena, and good afternoon to everybody. I will go over to the challenges we have faced so far to cope with the EBT approval. First point I would like to make here has to do with the fact that the two FCL procedures have to be approved, and this FCL procedure will lead down in operator's manual. I'm referring to the procedures you might all know. The first one is the procedure to empower the operator instructors to sign the pilot training on behalf of EBT examiner, EBT manager. And the second one is the process to renew the expired licenses within 1 year after the expiry date. Well, the second point is about oversight activities. We have updated the operator oversight plans to perform inspections on EBT training session in such a way that FCL and OPS requirements can be checked. In the same training session, FCL and OPS inspector working jointly can check not only how the operators carry out the pilot training, but also how the instructors or examiners perform their duties. Well, in conclusion, and to come to the end of my talk, I would like to underline that when an operator knocks at your door asking for EBT approval, both departments, FCL and OPS, need to work as one on the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Silvia. Thank you very much, Elena, for this wonderful presentation. Before breaking for another break, I would like to give the floor to Frederick. Frederick, are you there? I will introduce Frederick a little bit later on, but I would like that Frederick gives a sort of a briefing for our next panel. So Frederick, the floor is yours to give us some tips for the next session. Please go ahead. No, can you check your microphone, Frederick? Frederick?
Yeah.
Yeah, we hear you now. Perfect. Thank you.
Great. I just wanted to quickly put up on the screen.
Yeah. Something is happening. Yes, you have the presentation now. Thank you.
Very briefly, just coffee break. About the Q&A, Andy and I will be hosting in just a moment, and about the Q&A, pose any questions anytime during the box, and I will still collect. What comes to mind during the coffee break, also put it in here and try to get your question answered. To think about here about one is how will pilot licensing work. Two great presentations from the AESA as well as from EASA. I'm sorry, Francisco. There. And so I think it's good to think about that. Also reflecting on, of course, how we will qualify TRIs, TREs, how that will work. So that's another theme to think about. And of course, how will authorities organize this internally, which we've also touched on. So I think it's great to just juggle those themes and think about any questions you might have and that you want to reflect with the panel in just a moment. So that's just actually briefly where I want to leave this right now. I think it's, I'll hand it back to Francisco to announce the coffee break, but I think it's about 15 minutes, but Francisco, I'll leave that to you.
Thank you very much. We will break for a coffee break in a second. And then we will start, so now it's 1506. So we can start again and at 1520. So 1520. I will introduce yourself, Ignacio and Andy Mitchell, and then we will have a discussion on EBT matters. So thank you very much. We see each other again at 1520 Paris, Berlin, Madrid local time. Thank you very much.